Knicks make intriguing move by signing former Celtics draft pick. The battle for the top of the Eastern Conference has gained new chapters this season, and the New York Knicks don't want to be left behind. After the blockbuster trade for Karl Anthony Towns, the franchise entered 2024-25 with clear ambitions of contending for the title. Despite a consistent campaign that places the team third in the conference, there still seems to be something missing to put them on the same level as the Cleveland Cavaliers, and especially the Boston Celtics, in the race to solidify themselves. Among the favorites, the Knicks made a curious move by claiming Anton Watson, a former Celtics player, off waivers. The news was reported by Michael Scotto of Hoopshype.com, raising some questions about the team's strategy for the rest of the season. Watson's arrival comes after the Knicks opened two-way contract spots by waiving Matt Ryan and Jacob Toppin. With those positions available, the team also signed Marjon Beauchamp, formerly of the Los Angeles Clippers, while rookie Kevin McCullough occupies the final two-way spot. At first glance, Watson's signing might seem like just a minor roster addition. But is there more behind it? The forward spent most of the season in the G League, playing for the Maine Celtics, where he averaged 0 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 2.1 assists in 21 games. Solid numbers, but nothing that suggests he's ready to immediately impact the Knicks' main rotation. What makes this move more intriguing is that the Knicks are picking up a player cut by a direct conference rival. This could be interpreted as a subtle attempt to weaken the Celtics, even if indirectly, or perhaps a long-term bet on a talent their rival didn't have the patience to develop. Some would argue that these secondary moves can make a difference in such a tight race. Another angle worth noting is the Knicks' roster-building philosophy. While the Celtics and Cavaliers have consolidated their cores with stability, the Knicks still seem to be experimenting with options at the back end of their roster. This approach could be seen as a search for a missing piece or a sign of uncertainty about their current group. Anton Watson is unlikely to make an immediate impact, especially since he'll likely spend most of the remaining season in the G League with the Westchester Knicks. But could this move reveal something deeper about the Knicks' approach? In a season where every detail could determine the East's champion, even a seemingly harmless gamble could turn into an unexpected X-factor. What stands out is how quickly the Celtics gave up on a recently drafted player, especially in a year when the team's front-court rotation has faced some question marks. Did Brad Stevens make a mistake by cutting Watson so soon, or was it simply a pragmatic decision for a player who didn't fit the short-term plan? The Knicks, on the other hand, have nothing to lose. If Watson develops, they could gain an interesting piece for the future, or even a valuable trade asset. If not, he'll just be another forgotten name in the endless NBA roster shuffle. Meanwhile, the gap between the Celtics and Knicks in the standings is just 3 games. In a potential playoff series between the two, could Anton Watson become one of those improbable characters that basketball narratives love to produce? Or will this move end up as just another footnote in a season where the Boston Celtics once again seem destined to reign at the top? Are cracks forming in the champion's armor? That's the question starting to gain traction as the Boston Celtics move into the second half of the 2024-25 season. Despite leading the Eastern Conference and keeping their championship core intact from last season, Boston isn't immune to vulnerabilities. And if there's one factor that could derail their title defense, it goes by the name of Kristaps Porzingis. The decision not to make major moves at the trade deadline was, in theory, a logical one. Why mess with a roster that already proved capable of winning a championship? The arrival of Torrey Craig via the buyout market and the departure of Jaden Springer were minor tweaks, more about depth adjustments than altering the team's dynamic. However, what once seemed like a balanced roster could turn into a ticking time bomb, depending on Porzingis' health. The Latvian's absence has been a constant shadow over the season. The 29 games missed by Porzingis can't be ignored, especially considering the impact he had in the 2024 NBA Finals. Against the Dallas Mavericks, his presence was the surprise factor that completed Boston's puzzle. His averages of 12.3 points, 3.7 rebounds, and 1.0 block per game might not jump off the page, but his rim protection and floor spacing ability made all the difference. The problem is that this importance also highlights how overly dependent the Celtics are on a player whose availability has always been questionable. Porzingis hasn't played more than 66 games in a season since entering the NBA in 2015. Betting on his health as a decisive factor for the title is at best a calculated risk, and perhaps too optimistic. The issue worsens when you look at the backup plan. Al Horford, at 38 years old, remains a valuable piece, but age is starting to take its toll. His averages of 8.1 points, 5.6 rebounds, and 1.8 assists are the worst of his career. The veteran still brings leadership and tactical intelligence, but he can no longer be the safety net to cover Porzingis' absence for long stretches. This fragility exposes a contradiction in the Celtics' roster-building approach. While the team prioritized perimeter depth, the front court still relies on two fragile pieces, one due to health concerns, the other to the inevitable effects of time. Luke Cornett, Neemias Queta, and Xavier Tillman Sr. have been useful, but none of them offer the combination of size, defense, and shooting that Porzingis provides. Head coach Joe Mazzulla has experimented with creative solutions, such as using Torrey Craig as a small ball center in certain lineups. The experience against the Toronto Raptors showed that this approach can work in specific matchups, but it's far from sustainable in a playoff series against front-court heavy teams like the Milwaukee Bucks or Cleveland Cavaliers. Here's the discussion few are having. Did the Celtics make a mistake by not pursuing a more reliable big man at the trade deadline? Finding a backup center should have been a top priority, especially given Porzingis' injury history. Names like Andre Drummond or Kelly Olynyk were available and could have filled that gap without requiring major sacrifices. Another thorny issue is Porzingis' physical management. The Celtics have opted for a cautious approach, avoiding rushing his return. But could this precaution be fueling a vicious cycle? The longer he's out, the harder it becomes to regain rhythm and confidence. And when he does return, the risk of new injuries only increases. So far, the narrative has been that Boston can afford to be patient with Porzingis because the team is winning. But will that logic hold up in the playoffs? Against teams like the Bucks, Knicks, or Cavaliers, Porzingis' presence will be essential to ensure physical superiority in the paint. It's not enough to simply have him available. He needs to be healthy and in game shape. In the end, the Celtics are playing a dangerous game of Russian roulette with their title defense. The championship hopes hinge on a player who has been more absent than present. Joe Mazzulla has done his best to mask this weakness with alternative rotations and tactical adjustments, but that only works up to a point. The looming question is, how long can this strategy hold up? Boston has the roster to win back-to-back championships, but the lack of a solid contingency plan for Porzingis' absence could turn their biggest strength into their fatal flaw. If this gap isn't addressed, the dream of consecutive titles could crumble, not because of their rivals' strength, but because of an internal gamble on a roster with no margin for error. And if the worst-case scenario unfolds, the decision not to strengthen the front court at the deadline might go down as the biggest missed opportunity of the season. Javonte Green chooses Cleveland and leaves a silent message to Boston. Javonte Green, former Boston Celtics player, surprised many by accepting a buyout with the New Orleans Pelicans and signing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the biggest threats to Boston's reign in the East. The decision didn't go unnoticed in Boston, especially by Jason Tatum, a close friend of Green who couldn't hide his frustration with the choice. "I don't think I can say what he told me," Green revealed, leaving in the air the disappointment of the Celtics star. Green's move reveals much more than a simple jersey swap. The 31-year-old wing was having a solid role in New Orleans, averaging 5.7 points and 3.5 rebounds in just over 21 minutes per game. While those numbers don't stand out, his defensive energy and perimeter versatility made him a useful player for a team hoping to reach the playoffs. The player himself made it clear that his decision was driven by the desire to compete for a contender, something the Pelicans couldn't guarantee. "I want to play playoff basketball," Green stated, a simple phrase, but one that carries an implicit provocation. Did he not see New Orleans as a team capable of making a deep run? Or even more provocatively, could this decision serve as a message to Boston, a franchise that opted not to pursue him during the buyout market? The Celtics, in need of more wing depth, chose to sign Torrey Craig instead. A pragmatic decision, but one that raises questions. Craig is undoubtedly a more proven defender, but Green had an emotional connection with the fanbase and knew the Celtics system inside out. In a roster that values chemistry and continuity, did the front office underestimate the value of bringing back a familiar face? Green, for his part, showed no bitterness, saying he understood Boston's decision. They know what they're doing. They're the champions and know what it takes to win a title. Yet the coldness of his words hints at hidden resignation. Deep down, perhaps Green expected a call from the team where his NBA journey began. The irony is that his decision could now come back to haunt Boston in the playoffs. Cleveland has been a thorn in the Celtics' side this season, and with Green, they gain another wing to disrupt Boston's perimeter, one of the team's most vulnerable areas. Moreover, there's the emotional factor. Players with something to prove often rise in decisive moments. Green's signing might seem like a footnote in the grand scheme of the league, but it's in these small moves that epic playoff narratives are built. And if fate lines up a Celtics versus Cavaliers showdown in a decisive series, it wouldn't be surprising to see Javonte Green leaving his mark in a twist few would have predicted.